Drug buying agency Pharmac is warning further disruptions to medicine supplies are inevitable in the wake of the coronavirus, with increasing restrictions on air travel and shutdowns around the globe. Almost 65% of medications arrive in New Zealand via passenger planes, and airlines around the country are cutting their flight schedules in the face of travel bans aimed at curbing the spread of Covid-19. Air New Zealand is reducing its long-haul capacity by 85%. Pharmac says suppliers are required to hold a minimum of 2 months of stock in the country, and it estimates there is another 2 months' worth of drugs held by retailers. But it's talking to suppliers to make sure they are able to deliver more. It's rationing paracetamol due to supply disruptions, and Director of Operations Lisa Williams says if they need to, they'll do the same with other drugs.
I think it's inevitable that there is going to be disruptions to supply, whether or not that's due to manufacturing being reduced overseas or because of supply chains, which may be because of even isolation or quarantine measures occurring in New Zealand or other countries affecting the capacity of the supply chain. So, yes, there will be disruptions, but the buffer that we have in New Zealand of product will help us manage those.
What percentage of drugs you are bringing in do you think are at risk because of those things you've identified?
Well, most of our supplies come from overseas. And even the products that are manufactured in New Zealand are manufactured using raw materials or packaging that comes from overseas. So I would say that all medicines in New Zealand are subject to these risks, which is why we're taking this very seriously and proactively engaging with all of our suppliers.
So say some common drugs like diabetes drugs, heart drugs, cancer drugs, contraceptives. Do we have enough of those?
So those drugs, if they're contracted by Pharmac, which most of them are, we have requirements for minimum stock holdings in New Zealand equal to 2 months' demand. And there's typically another 4 to 6 weeks' worth of stock in New Zealand. So lots of patients will already have a good supply of these treatments at home as well.
In saying that, though, airlines, including Air New Zealand, for example, are cancelling a significant number of routes right through until June. And June's only when they will reassess the situation. So that buffer could conceivably be whittled away very quickly.
Yeah, I think the government's also been really clear that the pharmaceutical supply chain and medicine supply chain is one of utmost importance to New Zealand. So we're working to ensure that sea and air freight routes are open for imports and exports, and that we've got sufficient carriage that is coming to New Zealand to ensure that we can get those products to New Zealand.
Will it be necessary for you to break some contracts with some suppliers?
Well, all of our contracts with suppliers would require them to find alternative products if they can't supply their own products, and we work with them closely to do that. I think it's unlikely that we'll need to break contracts. I think what's happening right now is that our supply chain and suppliers are being incredibly responsive and trying to make sure that New Zealand has access to the medicines it needs.
But presumably those suppliers face the same kinds of problems, just in different locations. Everybody is facing the same kind of supply chain issues because almost everybody is in some form of lockdown.
This is a global issue, Lisa, you're right. And, you know, all countries are facing these concerns. The great thing that we have in New Zealand is that we do have many of our products that are under contracted supply, and we have good stock holdings of most of our medicines in the country.
So Pharmac has a number of sole supplier contracts. Is that presenting any particular challenges to you?
No, anecdotally what we hear from other countries is that the situation of having a sole supply agreement in New Zealand means that a supplier can more easily forecast the volume of demand in New Zealand, so therefore they're holding 2 months' worth of supply of New Zealand's total demand. Other countries' suppliers are trying to forecast how much of their product is going to be purchased.
Can you identify any particular drugs that you're concerned about in terms of supply?
No, as I said before, we're making sure that all medicines are available to all New Zealanders. We're actively engaging with all suppliers and ensuring that they've got sufficient stock and don't have any concerns about their supply chain and have activated their continuity plans.
I understand you're working with your suppliers, but I'm just wondering, are you, reluctant to mention anything because you don't want to spook people?
Oh, no, not at all. We're not in a position right now where we have any particular concerns about particular medicines. If we were in that position, we would be talking to the public about that.
I'm curious, do you have stocks of pneumonia vaccines?
Yes, so vaccines is one product that Pharmac does manage the purchasing and import of, and there are stocks of pneumonia vaccines in New Zealand. Yep.
So how many do you have, and is it sufficient, say, to vaccinate our elderly population? How many do you have?
I'd need to check that exactly for you, but generally for vaccines, we're holding at least 4 months' worth of normal demand. Now, obviously, if demand changes for things, that will reduce the length of time that would last for. And at the moment, we've been rechecking our volumes of demand of product for the Pneumovax and other pneumococcal type vaccinations.
Do you anticipate a run on demand for pneumonia vaccines more than usual?
Yep, so we've been watching the discussions in clinical communities about the use of products like this, and we are looking to make sure that we've got sufficient product here to meet New Zealand's demand for it.
So you are expecting an increase in demand for that particular product?
We are, and at the moment it's funded only for specific circumstances. So the stock that we hold in New Zealand is for funded patients, and we're taking advice from the Ministry of Health as to whether or not there should be wider access made available to treatments like this.
So should you need more of this, is there more available for you to purchase?
What we find with our vaccine suppliers is that they're incredibly responsive to trying to find more stock for New Zealand. We have very good relationships with them. But the one thing I would say about vaccines is that they do have a long lead time for manufacture. They take somewhere around 6 months to make. So we would be looking to see what was available already elsewhere in the world. And if demand is growing globally, then the vaccine manufacturers will need to look at increasing their manufacturing.
So you can't guarantee that you'll be able to get extra of these?
We'll do our very best to make sure that we can get what New Zealand needs.
But you can't guarantee that there will be extra stock for you to purchase?
I can't guarantee that there would be extra stock.
What about flu vaccines? Could you get more if you needed them?
Yeah, so the flu vaccine for this year for New Zealand, there's going to be 1.8 million doses of the influenza vaccine available in New Zealand. That's 400,000 doses more than what was available last year. And we're continuing to have discussions with suppliers to see if we can get access to more vaccine for New Zealand.
So we understand that you did make the additional purchase here, but should you need more on top of what you've got, is it available? Can you guarantee that there is extra to purchase?
Well, we're having those conversations with suppliers right now to see what else that they can access for New Zealand.
So unknown at this point?
Unknown at this point, yeah, but we're working hard to make sure that we can get what New Zealand needs.
And that's Lisa Williams of Pharmac. Now, Pharmac has confirmed to Checkpoint that it has just under 90,000 doses of pneumonia vaccines, which it says equates to several months' supply.